Why is it important to be spiritually connected in your marriage? And what if you're not?
Good question.
Well, let me start answering by saying, it all matters, Lori, and it all matters. We can talk about things one at a time, but we're complex creations. We are body, mind, and spirit.
Right.
So they all matter.
Right.
But we got to confess, and for us, that spiritual connection is more intimate because I believe the image of God that cries out from one of us to the other one is involved when we're spiritually connected.
Yeah, I totally agree. Totally agree. It's like image bearers of God, and we're longing really to go back to the garden.
That's right.
To that state of intimacy with God and with each other. That's our longing of our heart, right? What are your thoughts, Sharol?
Well, I mean, I talk about it individually. I think when we're individually connected to God, when we're living, when we're abiding, we're just filled with all of the. We're filled with all of who God is, all of the love, joy, peace, gentleness, faithfulness, goodness, self-control, and all these things make us better able to be good partners. So there's the individual piece, I think, but then when you share that together, you're both living out of this. It's like you both have the same plumb line. And so when you lose your way as a couple, you come back to the same place. And so not only does God enable you to live to the marriage that you want to live into, He empowers you and gives you the ability to do that.
And so what if one of you isn't connected to God spiritually?
I think speaking in the real world, we're never perfectly. I wonder if we aren't always a little bit like this, maybe at any point in time, one of us is maybe a little more spiritually warm and somebody's a little more spiritually distant. But I think you're asking the question, like what if my dedication is to follow Jesus, imperfect as I am, and my spouse's is not? That's a real question? Yeah, we'll throw that to Sharol.
Well, I still would counsel when I talk to women this is their story, and it's a painful part of their story, because as we grow deeper and deeper in our love for Jesus and we see our partner not experiencing that, it's just heartbreaking. So to watch them not having that power and that peace and that joy in their life is painful. But then how it affects us as a couple is we feel disconnected in something that's hugely important to us. And so what I tell women is your husband, but flip it around, works the other way, but your husband is on a spiritual journey. Just it's not like you're in, you're out. I mean, I know there is a piece of being in and out of the of the
there's
kingdom.
There's a point of conversion,
There is a point of conversion, but our spiritual journeys start long before that moment of conversion, and they go on long after. And as Neil said, I think it's true, even if our partners haven't made that decision to follow Jesus with their whole hearts. They're on a journey, and I think helping them articulate that journey and understand that journey and being open to it and seeing it as a movement. I think that helps.
Yes, I think so
Does
too.
It? What do you think? What would you say?
Well, I agree with you. I think that Scripture does say, be an example. Like be, even if your partner is following Jesus, you still have to choose yourself. Whether, and like to your point, Neil, sometimes you're maybe a little closer, feeling closer to God in times, and you have to kind of encourage your partner, and you take turns in that. So no matter where they are in their spiritual journey, I think that encouragement, that demonstrating the love of God towards them is love always wins. It always wins another over.
And you know what always loses? Trying to manipulate, guilt. If you don't come over to my side, this is what's going to happen. That stuff is just corrosive,
I tell women that if you're smart enough and manipulative enough and controlling enough, you can maybe get your partner to go to church. You can maybe get them to open the Bible, but you cannot help them fall in love with Jesus. That's something between them and God. Nothing you can do can control that piece.
Well, you guys talk about a really cool thing that I know didn't originate with you, but spiritual pathways. And it's a tool, actually, that you use to help individuals connect with God, but also if you understand each other's spiritual pathways, I'm assuming then it helps you connect to each other. So can you unpack it for us?
And isn't that great? If you could do something that draws you closer to God and closer to your spouse, this is a win-win.
Okay, so bring it on. What are the spiritual
we discovered
pathways?
This some years ago when we were trying to draw closer, and we don't do devotions. This is hard to admit, okay? I just said it now out in public. were very, very different. We started trying to figure that out.
We struggled with that.
And we had a lot of judgment about each other. Like, why?
You mean
are
when you
like
say devotions,
me?
like reading the Bible
Yes,
together
we sit
every
down.
day?
Yeah, people who aren't Christians or raised in the
That's a
church
good
don't know
word.
what that word means.
Yeah.
Right.
Simultaneously
But you're saying,
doing these holy moments, you know.
yeah.
And we're going to talk about prayer later. That's a different thing. So we're trying to make sense out of that. We're trying to make sense out of all these couples who are being really critical of each other. Like, he's not the spiritual leader and she's this. And so we ran across Gary Thomas' book called Sacred Pathways. So that's where you want to go if you want to know more about it.
Yeah.
And basically he says, he studied Christians over the last 2,000 years, and he said, there are ways we draw close to God. There's only one way to be reconciled to God, but there are different ways to draw close to God. So we started diving into that.
Well, it makes so much sense, doesn't it? Because while God is the same, forever the same, He's created us all differently, all uniquely, and we're different in our personalities. We're different. Why wouldn't we be wired up differently spiritually as well? And so that premise was enlightening to us. But as a couple, what it did for us is that it unlocked a lot of judgment. So Neil
Okay, tell us the pathways.
Well, I have a solitude
7, right?
pathway.
Well, you know, we've reduced it to 7. There's 11 in the book.
Oh, there's 11 in the book. Okay, I did read the book.
Gary has 11.
Okay, I reduced it to 7 then too. So can you just quickly just say what are the, so people have an idea?
Creation.
Yeah.
Service.
Nature for me.
Nature,
Creation.
service pathway, relational pathway.
Intellectual.
Pathway, solitude pathway.
Did we ever say worship?
Worship.
And activist.
And activist.
And activist, right. And if that went too quick, Gary Thomas' book is Sacred Pathways. So you can look into his book. He'll really unpack it. So tell us more. How do you use it then to connect?
Okay, so say, for example, in our story, well, we always say this, like, if you ever feel spiritually distant, and we all do from time to time, when you feel spiritually distant, our first question would be, are you leaning into your spiritual pathway?
Your primary pathway.
Because your primary pathway is where you stay close to God.
Right.
So is it solitude? Are you getting time alone? Is it intellectual? Are you studying? You know, is it activist? Are you being active in God's name?
Is it nature? Go for a walk in the woods.
Creation? Because this is how you stay healthy. But then the second point is, if you want to grow, you got to try something different. And then we say, why don't you experiment with another pathway? And then our advice is, if you're different from your spouse, experiment with your spouses.
Yeah.
I love that. We'll be right back to unpack that more.
Is your marriage thriving? We're here to help you make your relationship stronger. Call our prayer lines today at 1-855-759-0700 or visit 700club.ca and request Love and Marriage, a powerful resource and tool to use on your journey from striving to thriving to make your marriage stronger. It's yours free when you call today.
Well, we're back with Neil and Sharol. I'm learning so much. We're talking about spiritual pathways, which is great, from Gary
Thomas.
Gary Thomas's Sacred. I'm forgetting the title.
Sacred Pathways.
Thank you so much. I read the book, can't remember the title. But how does knowing spiritual pathways of your spouse then help you connect more closely together?
Yeah. Well, it keeps you from judging your partner.
Wow.
I think there's no hierarchy to these spiritual pathways. It's not like once you get to be a really super Christian, you're going to work your way up to this one. But we tend to judge each other. And I think when we're, the gracious piece of that is when we are growing ourselves in a certain way, we want that for our partner.
Yes.
But the ungracious thing is if they're not doing what we're doing, we think they're not growing.
Right.
And so this is the crazy thing in our relationship. Neil's he's just been pouring into the Bible for all of these years. He teaches the Bible. He's been a Bible college professor, president, 2 theological degrees. I judged his spiritual life because he didn't sit in silence for a few minutes in the day. He's madly reading and taking notes. And
I judge Sharol's pathway because she's a solitude person. I go, you're just sitting there, like you're not doing anything. You're like, where's the books? Where's the notes?
How much have you
what
read?
Are you doing?
I mean,
You know, it's like it's easy to miss each other.
And we miss the piece because we actually can be stronger when we appreciate our partner's spiritual pathway. We can encourage them to grow in that area. And then, as Neil said before the break, if we experiment with the pathway and we experiment with our partners, we really do get a window into how they draw close to God.
And so we don't say, why aren't you doing what I'm doing? You
Yes.
go, what are you learning in what you're doing?
Yes.
You know, and then you can be
Yes.
wiser. Yeah.
I totally agree with that. My husband and I are very different, which
Sure.
is actually the classic
lot of couples
setup,
are.
right? And I'm the student. I love to study. I get the degrees and whatever. And he's just like, he is a practical guy, but he's a prayer warrior.
Yeah.
He would sit and pray for, I'm just like, are you done already? You know? But honestly, I can say prayer saved our family, saved our marriage. When we started praying together, which by the way, we were praying people, but we rarely prayed together
Very common.
until the enemy almost literally destroyed our family.
Okay.
And then we started making a practice of praying together, and it transformed our family. I know it was actually the way that God went after our kids, strengthened our marriage, and now we're committed to this practice of prayer. So,
How do you do it? What do you guys do?
well, we usually try to start, and we're not perfect, but we try to pray almost every day together, whether it's in the morning. Right now in the season of life, it feels morning is good.
Yeah.
Other seasons of life, it's been in the evening.
Yeah.
And to your point, you ebb and flow, but it's been something that's been a priority. Instead of talking about a situation now, we actually catch ourselves and go, we just need to pray.
Yeah.
And that's made the difference. Rather than going over and over the situation, we stop and pray. And it's just been a natural part now of our marriage, but it took years to develop that.
Yeah.
What about you guys? What's the role of prayer as you see in your marriage or in other couples that you encourage?
Well, it's huge.
Yeah. It's been a backbone for us.
We started praying when we were dating, and we've prayed our entire married life. That has been the one kind of constant thread. So while we read different books, I read Henri Nouwen and Frederick Buechner, and Neil reads N.T. Wright. I don't know. We read different books because we're wired differently.
Yeah.
But and we even read different books of the Bible. when we go, our go-tos are different. But prayer has been a constant thread through our entire life, and it's been such a strong, strengthening thing. But your story is more common. Right. Christian people, we encounter couples all across this country who've been Christians their entire lives. They both have rich prayer lives, but they've never figured out how to pray together.
Why is that? I have some theories, but I want to know. I want to hear from the experts first.
And we're not the experts.
Well, I think the scary thing or the more negative thing would be because I have really some unconfessed stuff in my life, and I actually don't really want to come clean before God or my spouse either.
Yeah.
I think sometimes, speaking for guys who often just really like to feel like we're in charge of things, we feel foolish, like I don't know how to do it, or I might say the wrong thing. And of course, that's tragic, isn't it? Because you just come to God the Father as a little child and speak as a child. You don't have to be eloquent.
Yeah.
And so I think that holds some people back.
Yeah. I think for us, and my husband would be very honest if he was sitting here, that we were kind of waiting for the other person, like, come on, you're supposed to be the leader. You should initiate this, right? He's feeling the pressure of, I should probably do this, but, I'm the more verbal one. So he's like, well, I don't want to compete with that. And honestly, then we realized this is just silly.
Yeah.
And we were kind of unspoken, hoping the other person would do it. And then finally, really, we were just flat on our faces, to be honest. And that desperate moment, learning and loving to pray together has become the anchor of our marriage.
And you get better at it. Like you said,
you do.
here's the beautiful thing. Prayer is just like this deep, beautiful ocean that you can just perpetually go deeper in, right?
Yeah.
Do you know what we did? We had written prayers.
Yes.
Okay.
We were in such a desperate place in our life. And actually, it was kind of funny. At night, we were exhausted. We were raising teenagers, young adult kids. Our family was going a little, sideways. And I would pass him the prayer, your turn tonight. And he'd read this prayer. We didn't understand half of what was in it, but we read it. And then your turn, you read the prayer. And then we got a hold of some prayer books. Well, that just allowed us and gave us safety, back to that whole issue of safety, to pray together, to be vulnerable together.
Yeah.
Another thing that's really helped our marriage is shared purpose. And you clearly have a shared purpose.
Yeah.
Not that you have to do everything together. What is the power of a shared purpose in your marriage?
Yeah, I love that picture that you're working shoulder to shoulder sometime on a common thing. I think you learn to appreciate the other's gifts and you go, wow, you really did fantastic, or, thanks for working with me on that. And candidly, in the church, quite often we go separate ways in the church, right? Like one will go to certain ministries and one will go to the other. And that's good, we need that, but we need to have some ministries that we share, which is why marriage ministry is a great place sometimes for couples to serve, even just mentoring. Once a month, meet with a couple for an hour and a half, right?
Yeah.
This together thing, you learn to respect each other. You go to God together about this purpose. It's a great thing.
But I also think when you see your marriage itself as a mission, as a, it raises the bar.
Yes.
So instead of marriage just being a place where you're just supposed to make each other happy and hang in long enough to, when you see your marriage with the purpose for which it was designed, to reflect and honor God above all,
Right.
if that's what's driving you, it changes the way you do things.
100%. That's why this week we called it, thriving, right?
Yeah.
In our marriage, because honestly, that's what God wants for every single one of us. I can't thank you enough for being here this week, and you're coming back Monday.
Yes.
One more.
Going to join us for Family Days.
Yeah,
So
good.
if you've missed any of the shows, please go to our YouTube channel, 700 Club Canada.